welcome to episode 91 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 7th of November. So welcome everybody, I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today we have some knitting, some crochet, a little bit of bobbin lace and some information on this week's shop update, which is basically every Friday at 7 p.m. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I have my own website, crafthousemagik.co.uk, where you can find the show notes for the podcast, as well as patterns that I've designed, hand-dyed yarn, handmade project bags, stitch markers, etc., and also higher needles, which is very exciting. I announced that a couple of weeks ago, but in case you missed those last couple of episodes, I shall say it again, I'm stocking higher needles. But I will talk a little bit more about that later in the podcast. I will explain the different options of needle that you can have from higher, which I will be stocking in my shop. So if you're interested in hearing about that, stick around for the shop update bit of the podcast. So we have Barbara's Day Out, sort of Christmas dinner meetup on the 1st of December coming up. So quite a few of you have already contacted me either on the Ravelry group or on personal message or email through the various social medias, and I've booked a table for the people that have contacted me already. So we're basically going to be having a carvery menu rather than the proper Christmas dinner menu, just so that we don't have to give a deposit and we can actually pay on the day, which is a bit easier for me really to organise. But the venue is Dunstan Hall, and it's a very posh venue, so it has to be for Christmas, doesn't it? But I will be taking some festive things like crackers to make it our sort of Christmas dinner. So it's going to be fab. So if you do want to come, don't forget to message me, or like I say, personal message, or on Instagram or on the Ravelry group for Barbara's Day Out if you do want to come, so that I can make sure that I've booked the table for enough people. So that's the 1st of December at Dunstan Hall at 12 o'clock. But there are more details. It'll be in the show notes and on the Craft House Magic Barbara's Day Out Ravelry page. That's a bit of a mouthful. Anyway, I still haven't drawn prizes yet for the 2 knit-alongs that finished last week, but I will do this after the podcast. I will sort it out and go over to the Ravelry group, and I will actually link the winners in so that you'll be informed about that. But we do still have the festive craft along going on in the Ravelry group. So if you've got anything that you're making things for the festive season, either as gifts or things that are sort of just festively themed, and any tenuous links, love to hear them. Come over to the discussion thread and share what you've been making. I'm not having a finished objects thread for the festive craft along. I will be drawing for prizes in the discussion thread. So you can't find one, because there isn't one. A finished object thread, that is. Anyway, I'm rambling on now. I better get on to the good stuff. So let's get on to the knitting section. So I have been knitting yet again on my star flake shawl. So if you still want to make it a surprise, there will be spoilers, and I'll be showing you my star flake shawl in a moment. And again, I'll pop a timestamp on the screen to tell you where to jump onto if you're not interested in seeing that, or you want to keep it as a surprise, because I do think it's nice if you are trying to keep it as a surprise. It's nice for people to warn you that there's going to be a spoiler, even though I am quite late. Most people have probably finished theirs already. But it is the rows are getting quite long now. I am actually just starting the clue 4, which is section 7, I believe. And I am just going to try not to bash the needles on the table and make a racket. Oh dear. Right, so this is how my shawl is looking so far. Well, I've almost finished, more or less. It's more and more difficult for me to show you the whole thing on the podcast, really, just because of how large it's getting. And I am a relatively tight knitter, so I know that mine is probably a little bit smaller than most people's. But it is still quite big. So I think I have about 7 more rows of this grey section to go, and then I've got to do an I-cord bind off in the 2 colours. Well, that's if I'm doing the smaller size. There is an option to keep continuing that, and I will come a little bit closer to the screen and show you that lace in a little bit more detail. So I think I was about there when I showed it on the last week's podcast. But you can see those lovely great big eyelets that are actually getting bigger as it goes out into the shawl. Maybe I might be able to get this finished by next week, and then I can actually show you a different project on the podcast. But I'm knitting this in my own hand-dyed yarn, in Nobody Does It Better, which is this coral colour, and Ordinary World, which is this blue-grey. And I really love how those two colours work together. So again, the pattern is called the Flake shawl, and it's by Stephen West. And it was a mystery knit along, which started on the 4th of October, and I think it finished very beginning of November, I think. The last clue came out, but I'm still working on mine. These rows at the edge here, it's difficult to hold it up, but these rows are absolutely massive now. They do take quite a long time to knit, but there are, now that I've gone past the sort of eyelet rows, it is a lot of plain sort of knit or purl, which is nice. And I will be able to give you a better idea of what it looks like next week, hopefully when it's finished, fingers crossed. If I've only got, I don't know whether to actually do the sort of smaller size, because I quite liked a thinner bit of grey on the edge here. I'm not sure. What I'll have to do is look out for the more finished objects on Ravelry and see what those look like to decide what I'm going to do. But if I only do the last sort of 7 rows and then do the I-cord bind off, I'll definitely be able to finish that by next week. And I maybe be able to get it done if I did a few more, actually. We'll see. So I've seen that on Ravelry, some of them have got quite a wide band if they did the larger version, and I didn't like such a large block of colour on the outside, but I could break that up with some of the coral in the middle, but we shall see how I get on with that. So that's this week's progress. I do love the way Stephen West designs things. You just don't know what to expect for the next section to be. So it's so exciting to do these mystery knit-alongs. And it's a good job I like it. Because it's a lot of work to knit up, but I do tend to think that if you pick colours that you really know that you're going to enjoy wearing, and colours that aren't perhaps too busy, because he does quite complex patterns, I suppose. If you do them relatively simple, I think that they still turn out in your taste, if you know what I mean. But some of them are quite strange shapes, but it's so much fun. Right, so that's my Stephen West shawl progress at the moment, but I have actually picked up an old project that I started last year, and these are my candy cane socks. So this is a pattern that I designed, and the pattern's available on Ravelry or my website, but it's basically candy canes going all the way down the foot, and it's a cable technique. So if you've done cables before, you should find this quite easy to do. There is a little tricky little stitch, but I have actually got a video on my channel to do that stitch, but there are links to that on the pattern page on Ravelry if you're interested, if you can't find it. But if you look on the tutorials list on my YouTube channel, you should be able to find it too. So on this pattern you also get a Christmas tree heel, which you can't really see that well because I've got it on a sock block, but it's like a Christmas tree shape across the back of the heel. It's a heel flap and gusset method, and it's a top down sock. And I just thought that was a really cute idea. So I'm knitting it in my Jingle Bell Rock colourway, and I have actually cast on my second sock. So this is how it's looking so far. And I actually managed to knit a cuff this week as well, so that's good. I've made a good start on those, so I can get into the cabley bits soon. I do love a bit of cables. And I've got a little Jingle Bell Rock progress keeper that I'd made last year. I am actually waiting on some silver bells so that I can make sort of this year's version of this progress keeper for my website. So if you keep an eye on my Instagram page, I shall announce when those will go on sale, but they're going to have silver bells instead of the red ones. So that's how far I've got with that pair. So I'm using my higher sharps and my 2.5mm needle, and these are 60cm cables, which I prefer, but I think most people have the 80cm ones, but I prefer a nice tight loop to do my magic loop with, because I feel like it's quicker. I'm not actually sure whether that's true, but there you go. And I think if they're Christmas things, you have to have a bit of a jingle. So that's my Christmas socks on the needles. So I thought it is about time that I knitted something for the festive craft along as well, or made something for it. So I've got a couple of things that I want to get done in the next month or so, so that I can join in with you guys and doing festive things. So that's my second project on the needles. I haven't actually worked on my socks that I'd been working on for the Strictly Sock Along, which were the Cha Cha Chevron socks by Sandra Paul. I haven't actually touched those, but I did cake up some contrast yarn to do the heels with, so I'll hopefully get on with those in the next week or so I can show you next week. But I have got an exciting thing to show you. So Adam had been knitting on a pair of socks. I think he was showing it over Vlogmas last year, and he's still working on them. But in order to encourage him a little bit more with his knitting, I've cast him on a hat. He's been getting on with it quite well, because I wanted to give him some slightly softer, nicer quality yarn to work with to encourage him to get into it a bit more. And he is knitting a sockhead hat, and he's done that much. To be honest, I probably did about 2 or 3 rows just to get him started, and he was having difficulty when he was picking up his project again, making sure that he was going in the right direction, with it being on these sort of 16-inch short needles as well. So what I did, it's actually flipped inside out now, as I've put a progress keeper right on the outside so he knows what the outside is, so it keeps him on track a little bit better. So this lovely yarn was gifted by a lovely friend of ours, Peggy, and the yarn is called Scribbles and Knits Fibres, and it's in the colourway Lightspeed, and there's a lovely little explanation of the colourway on the inside there. I think that's really sweet. I wonder if you can actually see that. Hopefully that's focusing if you want to pause it and read what it says. But it explains why it's called Lightspeed, which I think is quite sweet. And this is what the cake looks like. It's a lovely sort of black with flashes of colour all underneath. There's some sort of burgundy and blue and greens under there, as well as some white flashes. And he actually said to me, "Oh, Ellie, I really like the way this is knitting up, so there may be some more knitting going on." He's got a set of my Chowgoo needles that I got in my stash that he is using, and they're fixed ones that are 16-inch needles, and I've been kind and gifted him some little panda needle stoppers, which I sell in my shop as well. He was like, "Oh, can I have some?" Bless him. He's getting into the knitting, so that's okay. Even though it takes him forever, it's fine. It doesn't matter how long it takes. It's enjoying it that matters, isn't it? So that's the sockhead hat. I can't remember off the top of my head who does the pattern, but I will link the pattern in the show notes on the website if you're interested in that. So that's all the knitting done, but I do have some crochet next. So I've been crocheting squares up for my Nature's Walk crochet along, and the pattern is by the lovely Sandra Paul from the Cherry Heart podcast, and I've done a few more squares since the last time I showed them to you on the podcast last week. So it's a crochet along, so each week there's been some different squares coming out, but this week people were starting to join them together. There was instructions to tell you to join them together, but basically I'm a bit behind. So I haven't started joining mine yet, but I did take some footage where I'd laid the squares out on the table so that you could see them a little bit better. So you could see how the colours work together. Again, my camera, even though I've adjusted the white balance, the purples don't quite show up as nicely as they should do. So I might have to see if I can get myself a new camera soon. But I will pop a little bit of footage in here to show you how my blanket's coming along. So I have about 34 squares done now, I think, and I think that there's about 48 that I need to do to complete the pattern as Sandra has designed it. So I'm not too far behind. Hopefully in maybe a couple of weeks I'll have finished all the squares and then I can get on with joining them, because I think that's the most exciting bit. So that'll be lovely. I now have a little bit of footage of my bobbin lace, which I did separately because I think it's easier to show you if I film it from above rather than trying to hold my pillow right in front of my face here. So I've been working on a piece to go on the wall. That's to go with a piece that I did probably about 2 months ago now, because I don't do bobbin lace that often, not as often as I want to. But I'm going to do 3 pieces in total, so I will now put that clip in here so that you can see how I'm getting on with that. So the bobbin lace I'm working on at the moment is from this book, Modern Bobbin Lace, and it is... that's the prickings, but this is what it's supposed to look like. But I have changed it up a little bit. So I've done one of the parts. There's a 2-part piece. So it's those 2 there are one piece and those 2 there are another. And I'm working on this second one here. So this is what it looks like so far. I did show you the first piece a few weeks ago. But once I finish this one, I'll show you the 2 together. But you can see that I've been crossing some of the pairs over just to give a little bit of interest there. And here are my bobbins that I'm using. So I've got some knitting stitch holders just to hold the bobbins in place so that they don't get crossed over in my bag. And that's how we're looking so far. So the threads I'm using are a silk thread, and I have one of them here. It's called Presentia La Paletta. And it's a lovely silk thread, although it is a little bit of a pain to work with because it sometimes comes unhooked from the end of the bobbins and it slides down loads, but it's worth it for the effect that it gives, I think. So that's how we've got on so far. So the last section is just my shop update. So I have a couple more bag designs going in the shop this week, Friday at 7 p.m. So I'd had this fabric in the shop before, but I'd had a different sheep fabric inside, and I've chosen now to do some ones with plain white inside because I think that complements it really nicely. You can see that there's 2 nice big pockets inside there, and all my bags have got a nice large box bottom, and this is the medium sized one. I do now offer a larger size, which is absolutely massive and quite difficult to show on the podcast. This is the drawstring version, which pulls in like this, but I do have the option for you to choose a zipped version, which will basically look exactly the same, just with a zip across the top of the bag if you prefer zips. So like I said, you can choose a larger version as well for this in the same listing, and I don't actually show pictures of the larger ones in some of the prints just because it looks exactly the same, just in a larger version, and I give you the sizes on the website. I have a new knitty related print, and it's got some beautiful yarn balls, which is really cute, in some sort of fluorescent colours there, which I think is really sweet. And on the inside there is a matching fabric with lots of writing on, which basically says things like handmade, love to knit, knit along. What else? I've seen lots of different things written on here and I can't think. Oh, knit together, yarn, loop, needles, knit along. It's a bit difficult for me to show you all that, but all the lovely different knitting related things on the inside. But I preferred this print, so I kept this one on the outside. But if you would like the writing on the outside, I'm very happy to do that. So that's again is a medium sized one, but like I say, I will offer larger ones in these and the option to have a zip instead of a drawstring. I do like to offer like full sets of things, and you pop them in your cart individually, so you don't have to have all of the things. But for the yarn print stuff, I offer DPN cases, and they've got the wordy fabric inside. like the bag, so that's a DPN case. I have some circular needle cases where you pop your circular needles in there, roll that up, and the little loop thing goes around the button to keep your needles from sticking into your yarn. And some scissor cases there, and you can also you can purchase scissors from me if you want to, and that comes with a needle and some stitch markers as well. Oh, and lastly, I've forgot to show you this nearly, is a little notions pouch, the same print with the contrast inside. But again, if you wanted these the other way around, I'm very happy to do that. And I'm offering the sheep ones with the white fabric inside as well. There we go. I forgot to say, on these notions pouches, the yarny fabric has got a little yarn progress keeper, and the sheep one has got a little sheep progress keeper there. And here's the other matching things to go with the sheep set. So you could, if you wanted to, have the whole set all matching. I love things to match. Sad, isn't it? But that's my new design for this week. So the shop update this week is on the 8th of November at 7 PM GMT, and I'll be offering a larger range of knitting needles. So before, I'd just chosen to stock the 5-inch length needles from sizes 2.75 to 5mm, but I've also decided to stock the 4-inch needles. So if you look at the difference, there is quite there's an inch difference in the length of the needles there. So these 5-inch ones I normally use for shawls and all the larger projects, but these 4-inch needles are ideal for knitting small circumferences on your sleeve, or things like hats and things where you have got quite a short cable, and having a longer needle can sometimes get in the way. So that just gives you an extra option. I just wanted to make it clearer as well with the cables that I'm offering. This size says 16 to 18 inches, just so that you understand this completely fully. That 16 to 18 inches includes the needle length. That's why there's two measurements, because it's plus 4 and 5 inches, and obviously there's two of those because there's 2 inches difference. So if you use the 5-inch tips with this cable, it'd be 18 inches long, and then if you use the 4-inch tips with this cable, it'll be 16 inches long. I actually checked by looking at the packaging. So that just makes things a bit clearer for everybody. The measurement on the packet or listed on my shop is the needle and the cable length together. So for a hat, for instance, I'd choose the 16 to 18 inch cable for hat knitting. So that's that bit. I have also wanted to explain how useful I find these connectors. So you can buy interchangeable cable connector set from me, which includes these two little rubber grip things for undoing your needles, which I think are really handy because you can screw it up really tight and they don't come undone. And then these connectors are the main thing in the kit, which I think is lovely. And basically you can screw two cables together. So say you haven't got a long enough cable on your project and you want to switch it to a larger one, if you just screw those two cables into this connector, you can just slip your stitches along. Very, very handy. I've also used to have some of those on my old Knit Pro set as well, and just so useful. So that's a little gadget you can get from my shop. So there we go. I'm also listing some more of these lovely little sets where you get a bag with like a full set of needles. I've chosen at the moment just to stock the sharp ones, but I may in the future, if you contact me, if you wanted one of the different sets, if you go onto the Higher website, I'm happy to get those in for you. But it comes with a really nice bag with a needle gauge, full set of the cables, and a full set of the needles from 2.75 to 5mm. That's a lovely Christmas gift. I've already sold quite a few of those, so I've got quite a few going in the shop this Friday as well if you want to get hold of one of those. Those again are the 5-inch length needles. because that's the ones that this is the set that I'd buy, and then I'd sort of add the shorter ones to my little set. Another thing that I've just bought off the Higher website, because I thought they were cute, is these are the actual cable stoppers that you can get. So last time I showed you that I'd got the, Adam had got some on his hat, so I'll show you those again. So these are the needle stoppers that go on the top of your needle to stop your stitches from coming off. And if you're doing knitting of a hat, that's very useful to have those, just to stop your needles coming off, because it's difficult to use like a circular needle case for something that's such a small circumference. But these ones screw into the cables so that you can take the needle off, where you're basically nicking needles from one project and using it for another, and you can pop these on to stop your stitches from coming off. But they are the cute little panda bears as well, with the little socks, and you can choose different colours there on the website. Last thing that I've got on the shop is crochet hook. Now I've only stocked one size crochet hook because to be honest, for normal crocheting I like the ones with the rubber handles, but for bobbin lace this 0.5mm crochet hook is great for sewing ends in, so I thought I'd stock some of those as well, because sometimes they're really difficult to get hold of. So I have a few of those going in the shop as well, if you've got any bobbin lace people out there. And I think that's all I've got to show you for the shop update. So last week we'd gone to a bonfire night, which is a tradition in the UK, where it was basically based on the story of a man called Guy Fawkes that tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. So they have a bonfire and fireworks on the go as well. But my local, one of our local areas had a really cool bonfire and fireworks display in aid of charity, so we had to pop along. So I shall stick a bit of footage at the end of the podcast of that. And I think I also have a little bit of footage of me and Adam popping over to our friends Claire and Rob's, where we did a bit of knitting. So there's a couple of minutes of footage of that as well. I'll pop at the end of the podcast. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me babbling on about what I've been up to. I hope you have a lovely week until next time, and I shall see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Got to get
You have to get
Cat's permission.
model's permission.
I like the little sheep. Whose sheep's this?
It's your sheep. Peggy give it you.
Ah, lovely.
How's your starflake going, Rob?
Yeah, really good, thanks. I'm on section 5. Not that great really, but hard to keep up with Stephen.
Yeah, he's just crazy, isn't he?
Crazy fingers.
Oh.
Goldfish
What's it
memories.
called? Goldfish Memories, that's
Goldfish memories, yeah.
it. Lovely.
I like this bit.
Them colours are gorgeous. I'm chopping your head off.
Don't do that.
Got my